Well, over the next 4 episodes, we're going to be talking with Andrew Hurd, Senior Pastor here at EV Church on the Central Coast, just north of Sydney, and also one of the founders of Reach Australia. We're going to be talking about his new book, Growth and Change. We're wanting to go under the bonnet and really, press into why it is that he wrote the book, but also what is it that he actually wanted to say to the pastor, to the leader of the Australian church. So, Hurdy, it takes time to write a book.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book, Growth and Change?
Yeah. There's not a tone there of why did you bother?
Why did it take so long, really?
Yeah. Actually, it is worth saying. I wrote the book largely 7 or 8 years ago. I wrote it a long time ago, and just with all kinds of things that were happening, it parked. It sat there for a long time, and it wasn't. And the reason I didn't also get back to it is because partly I was raising that very question, like why another Christian book? Does the world really need this? All those questions were quite genuine for me as well. And I think what I decided was, over the years of sharing this kind of material around the place, people kept saying it was helpful and it was useful. So I was led to believe it would be a useful piece to add, and so kept pressing on and pursuing it. I had a great support with Jeff Robson, who helped then get it all over the line, and it's been a great process with him.
Can I ask, Andrew, I've noticed over the years you're a busy pastor. You would be busy enough focusing on your own patch, but you regularly take time to think about sharing your thoughts, what you've learnt at EV on a bigger scale through Reach Australia, through FIEC. Why? It takes more work. You're already busy.
Because it'd be easier to not, because as soon as you put it out there, people challenge it, critique it, talk about it.
Yeah. Paul, I don't want to claim too much of this, but Paul says, I think it's 1 Corinthians 9, isn't it? Woe is me if I don't preach the gospel. He's got that sense of compulsion about him. And I certainly feel that about the gospel. I can't not. I feel this kind of burden to have to. And I think it's the similar burden I have for our country. Do you know, I want to see Australia won for Christ. And if there's anything that I could bring that might contribute to that happening, I'm going to do it. I'll step in and try and add value to that. And I get very passionate about certain things that I think if we could just make certain changes, if we could just do a few things a little bit differently, our churches could be more effective. They could reach more people, and we could see the country turned around. I'm very convinced that there's nothing inherent in Australian culture that means we can't see many more people converted. Sure, the soil's hard and all the rest, but we're seeing streams of people coming, wanting to know about the things of Christ. It's not just here; it's all over the country, pockets. So I'm convinced we can do more than we are if we just make a few. And so that's why I keep sticking my head up. I'm thinking, come on, we can do this. Yeah.
Now, the outcome of the book, the thing that you're pressing into is that you actually want to see growth in our churches. So at the heart, you want to see lives transformed, people won to Christ. As you've written the book and worked hard to get it to this final stage, what's clarified for you? What are the things that you've actually gone, no, I really need to speak about this?
Yeah, well, as I say, it's a good question, but the problem is it is quite a while ago, and I'm sure there were things that as I was putting down words and so on, it forces you to systematise and think through how it all fits together better. There's no doubt about that. I just can't remember what they are now. One of the things that does come to mind for me, though, is, I've talked a lot for many years about inputs, outputs.
Yep.
Do you know the whole thing about, there's things we do and there's consequences from it. And I think I've got greater clarity on what I'm trying to hit at there. And so that might be something worth reflecting on. Because I do hear some people say they can't get their head around it. And I think this is the most natural thing in the world. What's going on here? So if I could just have a quick shot at that. What are the big things I'm saying is that inputs are the things we do. Outputs, outcomes, are the things that happen as a consequence of that. That's not us doing it. And I think I think that's an important distinction for me, so that some people say, don't inputs become outputs? I go, yeah, kind of, you could say that. So my sermon prep is an input to the sermon output. But that's not the output I'm particularly wanting to care about. The output I'm wanting to care about is the consequence of that sermon in lives that I have no control over. And so I do these things. I prepare, I preach, I visit, I speak to, have conversations. These are all inputs. I run small groups and so on and so forth. But the outcome is the change in people's lives, which is not me at work. It's something else happening. That's the thing that I think needs to be distinguished.
But inheriting what you're saying is we have influence over that output. So you're not taking the pressure off in that definition of the output as something that we, don't have the,
we don't have control.
Yeah, we don't have control over the consequence.
Yeah,
but you have influence into it.
Well, that's the whole. One of the big things I wrestle with in the book is our outcomes, things I'm not now doing, things that are happening in the lives of other people. What is the connection between my work and that outcome? And that, I think, is a big theological issue we need to wrestle with as a church, because I do think we've got some theological predispositions which severs that tie completely. Now, I'm not saying we tie it back together completely, because that's Arminianism. That's a kind of a fool's errand, that path. But there is a connection that I don't think we're paid enough attention to that makes a very big difference in what goes on in our churches, how we do what we do, our readiness to make changes. Because what I've noticed is that we have a get-out-of-jail-free card that says, I don't need to make change because God gives the growth, I'm just turning up. And as soon as you've got that as your theology, there's no pressure to do anything differently than I've been doing for the last 100 years as church cultures.
I was reflecting on my first team pastoring conference, which is now Reach Australia National Conference, and hearing you speak at Foundations and really appreciating that clarity. Having come from a staff meeting where we've been discussing about a whole bunch of things, no clarity, what are we on about, and to hear you speaking with that clarity. What has helped shape that clarity over the years? Because I think in this book as well, you're incredibly clear. I think part of that is you have always got in mind, even as you talk about inputs and outputs, disciple making, a really clear focus on what we're on about. Yeah. But what's helped shape that?
Yeah. It's an interesting question, and I don't know. I feel it all the time. I think partly there's a way God wires us. I think there's just that. And I think in every area of my life over the years, before I was a Christian even, I think I kept asking the diagnostic question, what's the point of this? Why this? Why do I do this? What's the difference? In the sport I was in, what's the thing that makes that was just perhaps a wiring. I do think the kind of discipleship I've had has nurtured that and reinforced it. So I've worked with men and women who have been themselves very clear and have often had those questions in mind, like, why do we keep doing this thing? What's the point? And so I think it attracted me and reinforced me, and I find myself unable, and it's partly actually I don't want to waste my life. I only want to give myself to those things that actually will make a difference, and so I'm always going, is there a point to me doing this? So because I don't want to waste my time, I want to go off and do something more fun if I can't work out something worthwhile. So those things drive me down the path. And I do find myself, just as a preacher, I think that's the same activity in preaching. We should always be in a text saying, what's the point of this passage? What's the writer driving at? What's the thing he wants me to get from this? And so that regular weekly, daily activity just I think it cultivates a shape. And that's become now something I think of very ingrained. Yeah.
So who did you have in mind as you wrote the book?
Yeah, a couple of audiences. So the first audience I had in mind was unconverted Australia. Do you know what I mean? I want to see Australia won for Christ, and other countries that I visit and so on. I want to see them fruitful and effective. So there's the first audience. And here, one of the things that constantly is in my mind, we've got a big barn. There's a lot of people in it, But we're a drop in the bucket. When you look outside the barn, you see hundreds of thousands of people, and I keep seeing them. But the other audience, of course, towards that is the leadership of churches particularly. So not just the senior pastor, though that's significant, but the senior minister, leadership teams, elderships, those that actually shape and flavour the way churches function. They're the ones I've particularly got in mind.
And as you've spoken about a lot of the issues and challenges in the book, is there something particular that sort of, keeps driving you to keep saying the hard things to pastors? Well, 5 things plus 1. So one of the big things in the book is a chapter on the 5 things plus 1. Look, I every morning I wake up and I preach to myself the same sermon, which is life's all about Jesus. There is a heaven and hell is real and it's forever. Those who go there, Jesus weeps over the lostness. Life is short. How am I going to spend these few days I've got? Jesus went to the cross because these issues are so serious. The Father did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all. And if I've got any sense of love for people around me, I want to see change happen. So those things, and then, of course, the Lord Jesus saying, make disciples. And so that's very much constantly in my heart and mind that keeps me going, because my natural tendency, I've said this now a few times in different places, but my natural tendency is to be a beach bum. So I need to preach that sermon to myself, and I know others need it as well. So there's a logic to it, but at its core, there's something that's really shaping your heart. You say a number of times, if there's something more at stake here. It's not it's not just a job. There's a reality here that people are going to heaven or they're going to hell.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the book is not actually about ministry structures. I think it's now, and there's an appendix that talks something.
That's the next book that you got to start writing.
Yeah, perhaps. yeah, if I could bear the pain. It's the burden of the book is to produce change in the head and heart of a leader. Because what I've noticed is where there's a will, there's a way. I've noticed this in ministry all the time. If I can get someone captured to the glory of Jesus and what it is to follow Jesus and how serious it is, they'll work out how to use their weekends differently to be in church. They'll find a way to help their family stop making them miss church to do family events. Where there's a will, there's a way. And so for me, it is very much first and foremost the change we need to make is in the head and heart of leaders of churches. The senior leader, but the leadership culture is shaped by them plus others. And if we can get that to happen, and what's interesting to me is as I talk to pastors all around the world, they say yes to these things, but when you press into them, they actually don't feel a burden about these things. So it's one thing to tick the box, I believe. It's another thing to have a burden where woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. Not I should, it's right to. I want to create the woe is me bit. Yeah. Woe is me if I don't change things in church to make it more effective. Woe is me.
Can I drill into that? What do you think the disconnect is caused by? Because we have the scriptures, we have these clear convictions. Where's the disconnect between those convictions and the way that we shape our ministries, the way we shape our lives?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think there's a spiritual thing going on. So I think we need to pray to God that by His Holy Spirit He transforms and changes. There's a spiritual thing. Have we grieved the Spirit? Is there something happening there? There's a spiritual reality we need to pay attention to. But there is also a larger system thing that's part of our Reformed evangelical culture. And it is interesting to me. I see similar pieces here in overseas places. And so I think what happens is we're against the idea of the radical because they seem immature and they're going to blow up on us, And so we tend to have a calming influence on everybody, just steady down and settle in for the long jog.
So the radical, that's the risk taker.
The risk taker, the crazy person, the person who speaks to all their friends and breaks their relationships.
Or too passionate and enthusiastic about it all.
Yeah. We kind of go, whoa, that's you need to grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so as a culture, we tend to, a friend of mine talks about grass. He says, we don't have tall poppies because we've planted buffalo, and we mow it every week. And so we've created there's a culture, there's a system that's created in our areas that does play on each of us. And I think that's part of the story as well.
So you have this push to pursue growth, but at the same time you also highlight the dangers inherent in being this person who's pushing the radical or the risk-taking, the urgency.
Yeah. One of the most important chapters in the book is on the issue of the danger of having a passion for growth. And it's not just feel, it's not just tick a box thing. There really is. I feel that danger. I feel the first few chapters around danger and passion, I feel that every week as I get up to preach. Because I'm constantly alert to, I want to see people saved. So I want to see the non-Christian who's stuck their head in the door stay with us. I want to see the immature Christian who's drifting, I want to see them stay with us. And so I'm conscious that there's some things that if I talk about them, they'll run. And so I wrestle with the question of, but if I don't talk about them, then people won't be matured. So it's a little bit of a tension between maturing and deepening the disciple and reaching the fringe and the unconverted. And that's a real tension. And I don't think we help each other if we pretend it's not there. And the dangers of just speaking for the sake of winning the lost is that if I'm too sensitive to what draws them or repels them, if I'm too sensitive to that, a heart of compassion will start to only sow those things that attract and not say much about those things that might repel. And so we need to be alert to that. I feel that tension every week. And coming to terms with the fact, actually, that the things they most need, that feel most repellent sometimes, are actually the most enlivening for them if we can just find a way to make sense of that and communicate that to them. So Packer talks about this wonderfully. I think he does it in the introduction of the cross of the death of death and the death of Christ, isn't it? The Yoan book. He has that beautiful introduction where he talks about the things. Remember this rightly. The things that people most need are the God-centered things. The centering life on the glory of Christ, but it is at the same time the stench of death. And so we need to keep pressing into that, even though it will repel some, but that's the very means by which people are truly converted and brought to the glorious life they're intended to have. And so, there's dangers of compromise.
So the tension of having a church that's focused just on the seeker at the cost of not actually pushing the Christian to have a respect for the world, but a desire to be a follower of Jesus and live a different life, a transformed life.
Perhaps to put flesh on it a little bit more. Look, I know if I talk about gender issues, sexuality, marriage, the way husbands and wives, I know if I talk on those things, the non-Christian who's putting their nose into church is going to go, whoa, My mother's unconverted, right? 93. Although we had a great conversation with her the other day. But she's still unconverted. And she says, I can accept everything except the church's stance on homosexuality. And you go, there's a defeat of belief, as Kelly would say. And you go, well, look, for the sake of winning you, I'll go soft on that. But to do that is death to church in the next generation. So you've got to wrestle with those things. In a wise way, in a winsome way, of course, but nonetheless. Church, of course, too, is for the insider. This is one of those big theological pieces we need to have in place. Church is for the believer. It's not the seeker service movement of many generation ago was a very bad mistake. It misunderstood the theology, but it misunderstood the consequences. Interesting, two points. When you go down church focused on outsiders, you inevitably touch less and less on the deep things. And you create a culture of church because church is the flagship experience of church, you create a culture where Christians are less and less interested in maturing because I'm not pushing them deeper. Ironically, on the other side, if I only focus on insiders without a heart to try and speak to the lost and connect to the lost and make church maximise every opportunity for the lost, I create a church culture that's insider thinker, a church that only thinks about living its Christian life without regard to the outsider all day. And so both sides, this is what I try and wrestle, both sides have their challenges, and we need to pay attention to the dangers that we sit in all of this.
And I agree with your comments, having been in a seeker-sensitive church many years ago, very diluted, watered-down teaching. So it really did impact on people's maturing and growing in Christ.
And you can't reclaim that.
No.
You put on a midweek thing to try and give them depth. They don't come.
Yeah. Can I ask, a lot of your examples you've helpfully given us focus on the impact on the unconverted. Any dangers for the pastor himself in terms of pursuing that growth, that focus on growth and change? Any dangers for the pastor?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, there's the danger of compromise. It's a good question, Joe. There's a danger of the me project. So, you asked earlier, what are the things that have become more clear to me over the years? One thing that's become clearer to me is identity issues for pastors. For humans, we all have them. And when you come into pastoral ministry, it's easy to transfer all your needs and wants and insecurities into your ministry. And so, the more I focus on the pursuit of growth, the more I'm in danger of building my identity around whether this church is growing or declining. And that's, again, lurking. Sin is lurking at the door. I like that. Sin is lurking at the door. That is, it's very close. It's not very far away. It's right there at the door. And that sin of the me project is lurking there for us all. And so, the focus on the outside, or the focus on growth, that is a very great danger that I become attached to the status and worth and significance of what's happening. And then I'm unable to say the hard things. Because I'll lose friends. I'll lose influence. And for us here, being in a team ministry is a real blessing. Of course, we have each other to hold each other in these things. But leaning into some of those, at times I deliberately pick a topic that I know will lose me friends. And I deliberately lean into it to go, this is not about me. This is not about numbers so much. This is about standing firm for Christ,
Really helpful video to talk about the importance of having Christ-centered community around you. You encourage the younger pastor, the older pastor, to be reflecting on these things themselves, but also be to do that with others, so that they're also challenging you and pushing into who you are. If you think in 5 years' time, I want you to think in 5 years' time, what's your hope from this book? What's your hope for?
What do you think it'd be? What do you think it'd be?
I think you're going to say the same thing.
It's pretty obvious, isn't it? What I hope from this book is that our churches will be twice as big. 5 years' time, 15. I hope we see churches that have been in decline, not seen converts for years. That might change. So I'd hope in 5 years' time our churches are seeing regularly now people converted. I'd hope too that churches are seeing transformation of life. So the whole point of the book, Growth and Change, is not just about conversion growth. It's about growth numerically through conversion, but growth spiritually in transformation and change. So because just there, it's easy to notice that we're not seeing many converts because it's a very objective number. Have you seen someone converted this year? No, it's a very easy thing to pick. But what's also concerning is as much as we can tell these things from the data that we have, our churches are not seeing people changed. We're not seeing lives transformed into radical, Jesus-centered Christians. And so that's also an area of great concern that we need to pay attention to as well. So I want to see those things. And with that in mind, therefore, my hope is that the leaders of churches would themselves be changed. That they'd have a greater sense of burden, a greater readiness to make decisions that are hard, make changes, embrace risk, step out, all of that.
Great. Well, we're gonna keep pushing into this over the next 2 or 3 episodes. Our next episode is going to focus on numbers. So stick around for our next episode with Herdy, talking about growth and